I was always right in the middle of the room, and a lot of times people didn't notice you, so they would say and do anything around you, and I have a memory.
Musical theater legend Stephen Sondheim once referred to Paul Ford as the world's most tireless rehearsal pianist and a walking memory bank of every song that has ever been written for any musical on any continent. Now in his memoir, Ford recounts his life both on and off Broadway, a personal narrative intertwined with the history of musical theater. He discovered his love of the genre and the piano as a child, a passion encouraged by both his mother and his father.
They bought me lots of music. Like for Christmas, it was like, no, I want these 20 vocal scores from Broadway shows. I don't need any underwear, or socks. Don't give me any of that stuff. Just this music, and they would do it.
The subtitle of Ford's book, Working with Stephen Sondheim, highlights his experience with the master composer, but candid tales featuring many other luminaries fill its pages. Madonna, Warren Beatty, Lauren Bacall, Patti LuPone, Bob Fosse, and Bernadette Peters, just to name a few. And for 25 years, Ford worked closely with Mandy Patinkin, collaborating on multiple live performances and recordings with the singer and actor.
Easy. Anyone can whistle any old day. Easy. It's all.
Well, he, did this movie called The Princess Bride, and he had this line in it, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You kill my father, prepare to die." And he would say that at the end of every concert. It was the closest thing I ever got to being involved in a rock concert.
Today, Ford discusses his lifelong affair with musical theater, his own personal struggles, and his new book, which gives a sometimes funny, sometimes poignant, but always fascinating look into his time on Broadway. I'd like to welcome today our guest, Paul Ford, luminary from Broadway stage and very well-known musician. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Throughout your book and the way you get referred to, it's piano rehearser, I guess, if you're talking about Broadway. What's your actual title, and what are some of the bigger jobs you've had?
Well, my mother always said, I guess he's just going to be an accompanist, because I was not ever in the center spotlight. Mm-hmm. But I was a rehearsal pianist and a pit pianist and an audition pianist and an arranger. And sometimes I even wrote the score for the composers for the shows because they didn't know how to write music on paper. So I was a jack of all trades.
And that's a big thing on Broadway, and all of the work that goes in the background is huge. And just an accompanist does not really reflect the jobs that you do.
Let's just say I was always right in the middle of the room with everybody around, and it was, a lot of hard work and a lot of fun, and a lot of times people didn't notice you, so they would say and do anything around you. And I have a memory.
And you wrote it all down, but it was a huge list of people that you've gotten a chance to work with throughout your career throughout Broadway. And you started off in Atlanta and even mentioned your mother. What made your mother think, as far as you know, that you were just going to be an accompanist?
She tried me in all different directions, and when it looked like I wanted to play the piano, she got me lessons. And she was very happy that I was making such progress, but I think she had this notion that I was going to be an actor and that I was going to star in something, or at the very least make commercials. And she was always happy with everything I did, but she really wanted me to be center stage in the spotlight.
And was your mom involved in show business or performance? Why did she even push you in that direction?
Oh, she's the last chapter in this book that I wrote. And it was all about where did she learn all. She was a simple person from Nashville, Tennessee, and she got the travel bug. She got the movie bug. She dragged me to what our version of the St. Louis Muni, which was Chastain Park Theater under the stars. And she took me to so many things, so many adult movies, Tennessee Williams, and all these big musicals, outside. And I don't know where she got the interest, but she transferred it to me, and in spades. And she was the greatest person I ever met.
And you had a lifelong, very close relationship with your mother and your father as well. It seemed like they were both at least somewhat supportive of a career in the arts and performance and creativity, which is not the typical sort of story of a lot of people involved in the arts.
Well, he unfortunately died 40 years ago, and he never got to see me do all of this work in New York. But he came home. It's a story in the book. It's short. He came home from work one day with a brown paper bag with a little book of music, 30 years, 30 hits. Can you play these? And I went, I don't know. So he put one, play that one, Toot Toot Tootsie Goodbye. He started singing, and Hard Hearted Hannah, and Sleepy Time Gal, and who is this person? My dad started singing and said, we're going to entertain the Bridge Club for the next few weeks. And I was mortified. But he was such a character and so much fun, sweetest man that ever lived.
Seems like when you were growing up in Atlanta and the school and the university that you went to, you got trips to New York and you kind of got dropped into what became a career. Can you talk about that a little bit?
It was senior year in high school. I got a mysterious phone call from the head of this great big mega hub school called Northside High School of Performing Arts. We need a pianist to play rehearsals for this show. I'll pay you $75 for 6 weeks' work. And it's like, ka-ching. It's like money for playing the piano. So I went over there. I stayed at that school for 4 years, and twice a year we came to New York, and that was 1970 to about 75, really. And I got to see every great Broadway show during that period, including all of the really spectacular early Stephen Sondheim musicals. Never in my wildest dreams would I figure I'd be doing his, 6 major productions of his shows with him. So the school was just, boy, did they work me. It was the director, me, and 350 students, and each and every one of them a little diva. And it's like they all needed me, and it's like there was a lot of work, and I certainly learned everything I needed to know to come to New York.
What was it like for you the first time you went to New York to see some of these shows that maybe had come to Atlanta where you grew up and were raised?
The first show I saw on Broadway was the 1967 revival of West Side Story at Lincoln Center. Blew us all away. We just couldn't believe it. And we hadn't seen the movie yet. The movie had been out, but we hadn't seen it. And then when I started traveling with that school, and Stephen Sondheim, whose name is in the title of my book, wrote Company in 1970, and in 1971, Follies, and then 1973, A Little Night Music, and then 1976 or 5, it was Pacific Overtures, and that was all before I moved to New York. Mm-hmm. But I got to see those shows in their original states, and for a little, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, I got it, and I loved it. I just couldn't believe it. It blew me away, and there are times when, even today, that I just never stopped thinking about some of those early shows I saw.
Did that make you want to be part of it, or did you just enjoy the show, or had your mind already been set? This is where I need to be.
Working at that school during that time, it was really obvious that this is what I was going to be doing, and I didn't know where or how. And then moving to New York was almost an accident. And when I got up there, I was kind of dumped, so to speak, and I found myself alone, whereas I thought I was going to be in New York with somebody. So I thought, well, I better go to work because I've got a sublet apartment to pay for here. Mm-hmm. And so I went to work, and there were all sorts of interesting shows that came around the first year, and then I got what's called my first national tour. And I faked my way through that. I've never held a baton in my hand. And they had hired me as the associate conductor of Annie, the third national tour. And I knew my way around the keyboard, but so I took the job and spent a year on the road, and that was a real, meat grinder to put somebody through. It was great. I loved that show, and I loved those people, but it was hard work.
Was there one musical or was there one performance that really kind of set you on your way and kind of, it didn't separate you, but it made you go on your own power to want to be a musician and actually kind of find that path?
I was 9 years old in a school pageant, and we sang the song 100 Million Miracles from Rodgers and Hammerstein's Flower Drum Song, and the teacher played the record for us every day for 2 weeks, the whole cast album, and I was hooked from that point on. There was just something about the orchestra, the orchestrations. It wasn't, 60s, it wasn't Beatles, it was a full orchestra and these big belting, alive voices, and the material was funny and varied, so it didn't sound like your typical rock and roll LP where every song kind of sounded the same, So I just was really just all the variety and the imagination, and so they switched me to the other Rodgers and Hammerstein things, and I was gone.
From the impression I got from your book when you just mentioned the Beatles and your eyes are rolling right now.
Oh,
you're not a fan. You're not. You know what you like, and you know what kind of music you like, and you know what era.
So 1964, I was 11 years old, and I said, well, I guess, told my, Mom, I guess I should listen to these Beatles guys. So they bought me the first album, and I played it. And I like to say, I put it back in the sleeve, and I took it out to the trash and dumped it.
Wow, you actually threw it away. What do you even remember what recording it was?
Oh yeah, it was the first Beatles album. It's black. I think it's got a black and white photo with blue shading on it or something.
So since Stephen Sondheim is in your subtitle,
yes.
What was it like working with Stephen Sondheim and having that opportunity and doing it for all the times that you did?
Well, number one, he was a genius with words and music. Number two, he actually composed. He would never think of handing a rehearsal pianist a piece of music that hadn't been proofread and didn't have every single note that he intended written in it, so there was no guesswork. Some composers hand you a lead sheet, and you have to make it all up on the spot, which I don't like. I was so grateful that he actually wrote real music. And he was a gentleman, and he would come to the first few days of rehearsal and greet everybody, and sometimes he would play through the whole score for everybody to hear it first. He didn't always do that, but then he would leave for 2 weeks and let everybody learn their music and not stand and breathe down your neck, and he would never come over and go, you're playing that note wrong. He never did that. He just said, you'll get it. Very generous and complimentary and snarky, and you want those snarky moments because those are the stories that you end up telling the next 40 years. So he was a real character and funny and a great audience. He would come to see Mandy and I, and he was the best audience. Could be heard laughing over anybody, and in the wrong places. But it was something else working for him. And just having them bring in stacks of music that he had sent to the copyists, and they copied it meticulously from his penciled, things. Because there were no computers back then. So just to have the privilege of having all of that great music, just put on your piano. It's like, I'm the first person to play this, and it's by him. And I saw his shows, and I knew who he was when I saw the movie of Gypsy at 9 years old. I knew his name, and there we were, and it couldn't have been greater, and everything else paled in comparison.
And that's why he gets a partial title on your book, because
That's right.
You were a collaborator along with Mandy Patinkin. Can you explain what it is that Mandy did, at least on stage, because Mandy Patinkin's work is all over the place.
Right.
Talk about your collaboration along with Mandy and what the performances were actually about.
We started out a conductor put us together because Mandy got a recording contract. Go through songs with him. So I brought up this song that the conductor recommended, and after we ran through it, Mandy said, I don't want to sing that kind of song. I want to sing happy songs and upbeat songs and funny songs. So I brought him a big stack of music, the next week, and we started plowing through songs, and we put the yes and the no pile, and then we had to go through song by song, and he had a very offbeat, way of thinking through material, and he wasn't a music reader or a musician. So it was always about the lyrics, and he didn't care what I played on the piano. But generally, he would edit me and say, that's too much. Don't play any of that. No, don't play that. And so it's just like, a lot of times it was the simplest of accompaniments.
Suit of clothes is all together, but altogether it's altogether the most remarkable suit of clothes that I have ever seen. These eyes of
And
mine
so
at
we
once
did that
determine
for
the
25
scenes
years,
of the
and
papers
we
of
came
my
up with
home.
these incredible medleys of songs that make no sense being together, but he had a mental through line for each of them, and it was a blast.
And you went throughout the United States. Did you go around the world as well?
We did Australia, London, and Hawaii.
Going on tour like that and being able to show these people this sort of collaboration that you had, what was it like? Were you thinking about the audience when you were doing it, or was it really just you two working together and then just presenting what it is that you put out?
The material I would recommend to him and that he would approve, then I would actually kind of direct him a little bit and say, you know what, you have to do this, then you have to stop, and then do this little bit of action, and then get back on. And I swear, so much of it worked in front of an audience that I just thought, okay, I know what I'm talking about, and he was buying it all, and he just turned out to be this incredible, on his feet, improvisational guy and a comedian. It's like, who knew? And so, I just tried to help him with material that was showing off these talents that were emerging. I mean, forget about his voice. His voice was great. But it's like, how do you present all this material on a stage with one piano and him? And it was well, he did this movie called The Princess Bride, and he had this line in it called, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You kill my father, prepare to die." And he would say that at the end of every concert. It was the closest thing I ever got to being involved in a rock concert. The screaming and the whooping and the standing and jumping up, and I'd go into the wings so exhilarated. And so it was quite something, just the two of us. And I felt like he trusted me, and he loved my ideas. And so therefore, I was not just a rehearsal pianist, but I was his arranger and co-creator, and it was a gift.
And in your book, you don't shy away from many subjects that are controversial. In the intro by Mandy Patinkin, he says, if you're afraid of criticism, or if you're afraid of frank speech, opinions, or strong opinion, do not pick up. You can stop reading right now. It's over. It's done.
Yep.
You don't shy away from subjects, people you like, people you didn't like, performances you liked, performances you couldn't stand, entire genres of music that you did not like and you could not stand. But you're not easy on yourself either. You didn't shy away from your own personal difficulties as far as with substances and going in and out of treatment with that.
I'll just say it. I've been sober for 27 years, and my last 20 years of working were learning how to really do it and be present. And I used to be very afraid playing the piano. I mean, even though I'm playing great stuff and there's like 20 instruments all around me and singers on stage, I was still afraid. And so I found myself learning how to breathe while performing for Mandy in particular, and walking on a stage, and I finally was able to really enjoy myself the last 10 years or so. Whereas before it was always like, I'm playing with all these Yale musicians and all these like old pros from old Broadway, and it's like, I'm not worthy of this. And then I got worthy because I just went and did my job. It became a service, a service that I rendered playing for these shows instead of me worrying about how am I doing. I just showed up and did a service. And that took a lot of the stage fright and a lot of the fear and away.
Do you think you're better for that, or do you think the substances actually put you in the place you needed to be?
No, I am not one of those that believed that in order to be a good musician, a lot of you hear this. I heard this my whole life. You got to be an alcoholic. You got to be a drug addict, and you got to really, get hard and heavy with everything. And no, none of that ever helped me, And I managed to get through with periods of sobriety, and then got really sober, for the last 20 years. And no, there was nothing useful about performing with a hangover. Nothing, if you don't mind me being so blunt. It's just, I would have to get up and play auditions for people, which I loved to do. A lot of people thought that was grunt work, but I loved it. You would show up at 10 o'clock in the morning or 9, and they'd throw music in front of you, and you'd read it like crazy, and you'd work with them for 5 minutes, these actors who were nervous and scared. And it was my job to be of service to them. And I loved that. But it was no fun with a hangover.
Are you just now listening to your mom because she warned you of that early on?
Oh, you read my book.
I told you I read your book.
Okay. She introduced me to my Uncle John when I was about 5 years old and had to explain to me why he looked the way he did. And she said, don't ever take a drink. Do not ever take a drink. And I went, okay. And I waited till I was a senior in high school, and then I did. It was off to the races. And I just thought, sorry, Mom, I'm Uncle John. And I felt guilty about it for a long time. Yes, she was definitely, she had strong opinions. Gee, where did I get it from? And she laid me out. Even at 5 years old, I understood it. I can remember that day. I can remember where we were and the incident that caused her to drag me away from my Uncle John and give me this big lecture about drinking.
Did you feel guilty while you were doing it, or were you not thinking about it? Were you in your element? You were creating, you were writing, you were talking to all these theater people. You were part of the action, or did you always have that voice in the back of your head?
All along, I really thought, you're going to pay for this. Every time I went to the bar and got drunk, I would say to myself, you're going to pay for this, and I knew yes, guilt and shame, but I couldn't stop.
Another big part of the book that I want to make sure to get to is your partner, who if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine, but he's also a big part of that book.
Well, I met somebody in 1982 across a crowded room, and we weren't the most, compatible people, but it was my one long 12-year relationship, and he died horribly of AIDS. And boy, during that last 6 years, I was drinking heavily, and I'd gained a lot of weight, and I was playing for these fantastic shows, and I was working with Mandy and touring, and all the time I was thinking, he's going to be found in a gutter, somewhere. There's going to be the phone call that he's going to, have been found, having done something terrible. And I just, that was a horrible period. And I think back on it with such sadness. And 8 months after he passed, I got sober because life was so, I'd hit a bottom, not as big a bottom as he did because he was no longer with us. And so that was something to go through that I never thought. He was 36 and I was 42. Pretty young to have to go through that kind of thing.
You were in New York during the AIDS, HIV, the heart of the crisis. Did you have a lot of fear yourself? I don't think you really addressed that in this book.
I curtailed a lot of behavior, and that probably saved my life. And so was I afraid? I wasn't too afraid because, like I said, I cleaned up my act in some ways. And now I really take care of my health, And but back then, we were young and we thought we were, immortal, and we weren't.
Was writing this book part of you continuing to take care of yourself, kind of giving an accounting of what it was that you actually did back in the day?
In a way, but mostly it was 11 years ago I walked out of rehearsals on a show that I just couldn't do another bad show. So I just left and I told the conductor I won't be back tomorrow. And then I started, I've got a lot of stories up here, and before they go away, I better write them down. And I got some encouragement from a couple of people, so I started writing and writing and writing, about 600 pages worth, just anything I could remember, and a mess. And then, but was it a purge, or was it a gigantic in certain, communities? Was it a big fourth step, a personal inventory? In a way, but mostly it was I just wanted to get these stories written down because for me, I thought somebody might get something out of them, and just at least a laugh, So I really felt like I've got to preserve all of this, experience I've had and share it.
And do you think that's happened? Do you think, have you gotten any feedback from what you put down?
It came out last April, and, we were just waiting for the lawsuits. But me and my publisher, who lives upstairs, and we whittled it down and cleaned it up somewhat. And I've gotten so many, people out of the woodwork from all the show business years saying, I just read your book, and you told the story of my life, and you said things that we all wished people would, And so I've gotten a lot of compliments, and there are a few snarky reviews on Amazon.com, but I haven't read them. I've just been warned. And then the rest of the feedback has been really, really warm and funny, and we'll see how long it lasts.
And you retired, I want to say it was a little over 10 years ago?
It was 7 years ago from Mandy.
Okay, so you retired from Mandy, and you'd stopped doing other big Broadway shows before that.
Yes.
What are you doing now?
Besides growing really old, really fast, for about 5 years, and it's tapered off a little bit, and it has me nervous, I decided you're going to keep playing the piano every day for 3 hours a day. So I made myself 14 big, thick notebooks of music, stuff that I found on eBay or that I've collected over the years, just Xeroxed every bit of it, put it in these notebooks. And 4 out of the 14 books are stuff I've transcribed by ear from recordings that I've always loved, but there's no music for them. And if there is, it's in an archive somewhere and you can't get your hands on it. So I've got 4 gigantic books of stuff that I transcribed and arranged on the computer and put them in these notebooks. And so I collected music, I transcribed music, I arranged music for 5 years, and I played for 3 hours a day. That's what I did after retiring.
This book was more around the actual production of productions
Yes.
of theater, but you mentioned even in the book, there are other stories. You have too many stories, and you have other stories in you. Do you think you're going to come out with something else?
Oh, well, I don't know if I should say this, but I'll say it. If you buy the book and you read it and you like it, tell me, and I'll send you another 130 pages of all the stuff I had to leave out, including the stuff, that we worried about. So I've sent it out to a lot of people just in PDF form. Oh, you liked it? Here's more. So there's a lot left over, and I'm sending that out right now. And I don't know if there's another book. Not really.
Well, I'm glad you were here to talk with us about this particular book.
Well, thank you, and thanks for your questions. Boy, I wasn't expecting to talk about all of this stuff.
That's what we're here for.
Okay, well, good.
Paul Ford, thank you very much for joining us
Thank you,
today.
Rod. Thank you so much.
Okay.